The year 2025 marks a critical turning point in global trade as the U.S.-China trade war escalates to new heights, creating shockwaves across economies, industries, and individuals. The conflict, which began years earlier with tariffs and trade disputes, has now erupted into a full-scale economic war with devastating consequences. One of the most visible impacts is seen along the busy Chinese ports that once hummed with activity. Today, the docks are crowded with idle containers, goods that were once destined for the United States, now stuck in limbo. The bustling cities of Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Shanghai, critical hubs for China's exports, have witnessed their freight operations grind to a near halt. The stark contrast between the past and present is not just a symbol of the deteriorating relationship between two economic giants, but also a signal of a deeper crisis, a crisis affecting workers, businesses, and consumers around the world. The trigger for this new wave of disruption? A shocking increase in tariffs by the United States. The tariffs on Chinese goods have now surged to an unprecedented 145%, hitting industries that have long been dependent on exporting to the U.S. From textiles to electronics, the tariffs have sent shockwaves through China's manufacturing sector, forcing factory owners, exporters, and logistics providers into a desperate scramble to adapt. But even with all the attempts to pivot, the situation is grim. Port congestion is now a daily sight, with container ships stranded for days and many exporters left to deal with canceled orders, rising costs, and vanishing clients. It's a reality that's hard to comprehend for many, as they watch their livelihoods and businesses collapse under the weight of these new tariffs. On the front lines of this trade war, China's major export ports have become symbols of the chaos unfolding. Take, for instance, the ports in Zhejiang, Guangdong, and Shanghai, which have been among the hardest hit. The port of Yangshan in Shanghai, once one of the busiest in the world, has seen a dramatic drop in shipments since the tariffs were imposed. In the days leading up to the new tariff hike on April 10th, shipments to the U.S. were rushed onto ships in a frantic race to depart before the penalties hit. But when the 145% tariff was announced, the race stopped abruptly. Cargo ships bound for the U.S. began to vanish from the waters, and by April 10th, the port was eerily quiet, with barely any ships leaving for the United States. Reports from inside the shipping industry paint a bleak picture. Freight operations along the U.S.-China routes have been severely disrupted. Many shipping companies have already canceled or consolidated their sailings, opting to merge multiple vessels into one, even if that means sending ships out with minimal cargo. Shipping workers at major ports like Yangshan and Shanghai report that containers are now piling up, with no clear resolution in sight. In fact, some companies are left with no choice but to cancel bookings entirely, as they can no longer meet the volume of exports they once could. The ripple effect has spread far beyond the ports themselves. Once smooth operations have become a logistical nightmare, and freight companies are now dealing with canceled routes, stuck cargo, and financial uncertainty. This phenomenon isn't just a Chinese problem. It has far-reaching implications for global trade. Countries that relied on Chinese goods for their own production are now facing shortages, while those that once imported large quantities of Chinese-made products are seeing inflationary pressures. It's not just the big shipping companies that are feeling the pinch. Freight forwarders, small businesses, and suppliers are all caught in the middle, trying to navigate the fallout from a trade war they didn't instigate, but are now forced to survive. It's not only the ports that are facing a crisis. The Chinese manufacturing sector, which has long served as the engine of the country's export-driven economy, is now staring down an existential threat. Factories that once churned out goods destined for the U.S. market have found themselves in a dire situation. With the new tariffs in place, the cost of exporting to the U.S. has become prohibitive, forcing many companies to shut their doors or drastically reduce production. This situation has been especially devastating for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, that lack the resources to absorb such a heavy financial blow. Consider the case of Mr. Wang, a factory owner in Zhejiang, who has watched his business fall apart in front of him. His textile factory, which once made a decent profit from exporting polyester fabric to U.S. retailers, is now bleeding money. With the new 145% tariff imposed on his goods, Mr. Wang has gone from making $50,000 in profit per shipment to losing $40,000. What's worse is that he can't even sell the fabric domestically. No one is interested in buying it. I have $200,000 worth of fabric sitting in my warehouse, he said. But with these tariffs, I'm stuck. Nobody wants it. Like many other factory owners, Mr. Wang finds himself in a desperate situation where his only options are to either bear the financial burden or watch his business collapse entirely. But Mr. Wang's story is not unique. Across Guangdong and Zhejiang, factory owners are confronting similar challenges. Some factories have been forced to halt production entirely, leaving workers unemployed and goods that were once in demand now gathering dust. An automotive parts factory owner in Guangdong shared that his factory had become a retirement home rather than a place of production. Last year, we were working around the clock, he said. But now, our machines are silent, and we're just sitting here with millions of dollars worth of inventory that nobody wants. This reality has been mirrored across industries, from electronics to toys and even textiles. Factories that once formed the backbone of China's export economy are now left to scramble for solutions. Behind the stories of collapsed businesses lie the real human costs of this trade war. It's the workers who are often the most vulnerable, and in many cases, they bear the brunt of the economic fallout. In factories where production has been halted, workers are left without pay, their jobs evaporating overnight. An employee at a textile factory in Zhejiang explained that, with his company's operations suspended, he was no longer receiving a regular paycheck. I've been here for 5 years, but now I don't know what to do, he said. If things don't change soon, I'll have to find something else, but the job market is bad right now. As the economic pressure mounts, more and more workers find themselves in a precarious position, unsure of how they will support their families in the face of mounting unemployment. This scenario has unfolded across China, with millions of workers impacted by the disruptions in manufacturing and exports. In some cases, workers have been sent home with no promise of when, or if, they'll be called back. For the many families dependent on wages from these factories, the situation is dire. The closure of factories and the reduction of manufacturing jobs have added to the unemployment crisis, which in turn affects local economies that rely on these industries. A truck driver from Guangdong explained how the shipping delays have also affected his livelihood. I used to make regular trips to Hong Kong to deliver goods for export, he said. Now, there's hardly any work, and if it continues, I won't be able to support my family. For many, this trade war has taken on a deeply personal toll. It's no longer just about economics, it's about survival. And as the fallout spreads, it's clear that the impacts will be felt far beyond the business owners and workers who are directly involved in the supply chain. The ripple effects of this conflict will touch the lives of millions, creating a cycle of economic hardship that's difficult to break. While much of the attention has focused on China, the impact of this trade war is not confined to one country. The global economy is intricately connected, and the ripple effects of this conflict have already started to show up across the world. The disruption in the U.S.-China trade relationship has triggered a chain reaction, affecting countries that rely on Chinese imports or exports. Countries in Africa, Europe, and Latin America are starting to see the consequences of the trade war, as supply chains that were once stable begin to fracture. For instance, countries in Southeast Asia that relied on China for manufacturing and assembly are now facing delays and disruptions. Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia, which have become increasingly dependent on Chinese parts and materials, are struggling to maintain their own export schedules as China's factories slow down. The knock-on effects have been significant, with many of these countries seeing a rise in inflation and a drop in consumer demand as goods become more expensive. Similarly, countries that relied on Chinese exports, especially those that produced goods for the U.S. market, are now scrambling to find new customers or adjust to the reality of a shrinking Chinese export economy. Even the U.S. is beginning to feel the consequences. While the initial tariffs were designed to hurt China, American businesses are now facing higher costs for goods that were once imported from China. This has led to inflationary pressures in the U.S., with prices rising on everyday consumer goods. For American consumers, the trade war means paying more for products that were once affordable, especially in sectors like electronics, clothing, and household goods. The trade war has not only divided the U.S. and China, it has also created rifts within China itself. As the Chinese economy grapples with the effects of the tariffs, public discontent is rising. The Chinese government, under increasing pressure, has found it difficult to maintain its once solid grip on public opinion. The pressure to find a resolution to the trade war has intensified, but with no clear path forward, many Chinese citizens are beginning to lose faith in their government's ability to manage the crisis. Protests have begun to erupt in various parts of China, particularly in areas where factories have closed down and workers are left without jobs. These protests, while still relatively small, represent a growing dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the situation. Chinese citizens, especially those directly affected by the trade war, are beginning to demand action. Some are calling for the government to take a stronger stance against the U.S., while others are asking for greater financial support for the workers and businesses that have been most affected by the tariffs. While the Chinese Communist Party has managed to maintain a level of control, the situation is becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The economic hardship caused by the tariffs is starting to take a toll on the political stability that the government once enjoyed. As the pressure mounts, it remains to be seen how the Chinese government will respond and whether it will be able to restore stability to its embattled economy. As the U.S.-China trade war continues to unfold, it's clear that the road ahead is uncertain. The current state of affairs is one of economic chaos, with factories shuttered, ports clogged, and workers left without jobs. The long-term consequences of this trade war will likely be felt for years to come, as countries around the world adjust to the new reality of fractured global trade. For businesses, it means rethinking their supply chains and diversifying markets. For consumers, it means paying higher prices for goods and facing an unpredictable economic landscape. In the end, the question remains, can the U.S. and China find a way to de-escalate this trade war? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a new era of economic isolationism? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear. This trade war is far from over, and its impact will reverberate across the globe for many years to come.